as you all know, today AI has been applied in every facet of the human race. It comes with a lot of challenges. It comes with a lot of risk on its own, which are much more than the benefits promised. My name is Oladimeji Kazeem, the global founder of AI Control Alliance. We shall look at identifying the threats and strengthening and how to strengthen responsible AI governance in every organization today. Our agenda shall cover three parts. The first part is how do we set the stage for urgency. The second one will be around what kind of engagement do we have in terms of community calls and what are the possible actions. Then the third part will be the risk profiles. How do we look at the top risk and how do we mitigate part of this? So we shall look at this holistically to an extent. It's going to be a multifold video, but this is just one of 6. The first part is to look at urgency of AI regulation compliance. Do we require the urgency at this time? Yes, because maturity has gotten to a particular level. The whole world is going towards application. The whole world is going towards deployment, not looking at the AI tools. Now we're not looking at getting to the enterprise. So in other words, there is need for regulation in how this whole concept of AI is taken into every organization. Looking at the regulatory risk in current deployments, the United States Algorithm Accountability Act and the EU AI Act, they have set very strict expectations for everyone using AI within their spaces. What that means is that there are conditions for application. So it goes beyond just applying them. The unfortunate thing is that not many organizations, many countries in the world have this kind of expectations. So if United States and the EU are just a part of the globe, they are only taking care of their own side of the space. Now, what happens on the other side of the world? So that means they are still at a huge risk. Secondly, we are going to be looking at the cost of non-compliance. Yes, compliance on one side. What happens if there is breach? We talk of heavy fines, we talk of reputational damage, we talk of operational restrictions, and quite a lot of other things. Then we're going to look at governance gaps. There is adoption at every point. Unfortunately, there is no transparency. There is no accountability. There is no ethical oversight over AI, either as a tool or as part of it, as a component within the tool. How do we work around all this? There is need for establishing authority. And when we talk of authority, we are talking about who is accountable, who takes responsibility for all this. So we're talking about establishing authority in this case by considering risk audit. And as a case study, we are looking at GPT and Gemini. I've taken my time to study the two, and I can tell you that there are variance in some cases. In a lot of cases, there are variance. AI risk audit. There are so many ways of auditing a process or auditing a tool, but AI has a specialized way of being audited because the components are much more different from what obtains in generic processes. Comprehensive framework for identifying vulnerabilities in AI deployment, focusing on hallucination, which is a problem, biases, which is a problem, biases which are problems, and privacy risk. Considering Gemini, based on the little study that I have done around Gemini, Google Gemini, I can tell us that Gemini specializes in privacy risk analysis and real-time behavioral monitoring for AI systems. It's very good in that area. And GPT is very good when you talk of advanced language modeling to detect and flag hallucinations and bias in AI-generated outputs. So these two are really very good in their cause. Combined, when we talk of authoritative guidance, we are looking at best practices. We are looking at how best can we action models in such a way that we have minimal risk. Before we continue, I would like to clarify here on this call that this video is not an audit. I'm sorry, it's just an audit. It's not a tutorial. It's just to help us in understanding what audit is all about. It is not intended to be a tutorial. So please, it should not be considered as a tutorial. So I'm placing this caveat so that some people will not be expecting what they feel audit is all about. So it's just to reiterate the need for audit. It is not a tutorial. There will be other videos to come where we are going to dwell more on audit as a tutorial. Now, talking about community engagement and call to action. So many things out there, so many groups, so many professional associations, so many bodies taking care of one side of AI or the other, and so many certifications. All these are working towards a common goal, that is getting AI to be in every organization. However, these engagements are not still giving the right result because that plane called control plane is missing. 40% of enterprise AI projects underperform due to unrealistic expectations. Why? Because the expectations are never realistic. Some of them dies after the first deployment, after deployment. Some of them, after being deployed, the promised benefits are never accrued. Majority of the deployed AI projects fail in production because production environments are different from testing environment. They are different from proof of concept environments. So the fact that a model performs at the conceptual stage does not imply that it will perform in production. And that is where a lot of people are getting things wrong. Now, I would advise that whoever is watching this video should just subscribe to this video. And my reason is that there will be a lot of forthcoming videos on this. There'll be a lot. This is just like introductory, just to get us into what audit is all about. We need to start auditing. There will be continuous updates to build vigilance. There will be a lot of multi-channel touch points that we're going to look at. We're going to talk about how to foster proactive control culture in every organization. Now, I got this quote from one of the biggest practitioners in AI in the world. And he said, in a landscape where AI evolves faster than regulations, practitioner vigilance is not optional. It is essential for safeguarding compliance and operational integrity. Now, the first risk, hallucination in AI output. There are times you put in your prompt in any of the AI tools, any of the AI models, and you find out that it will just be hallucinating. The bad side is that GPT, Gemini, and these other ones will never come back to you to say they do not have an answer or they do not know what you're talking about. They would rather give you what they feel it is. Now, you can imagine what happens when you take their output and you're not knowledgeable in AI. You run with their output. that can lead to litigation, that can lead to a breach of compliance, that can lead to reputational damage and the like. So hallucination is a problem in the sense that the model is confused on the kind of result that you're asking for. Rather, it gives you what it feels it is. So if that is the situation and it gives you something far away from expectation and you're wrong with it, can be a big problem. Now, let's look at it from this context. When we talk of hallucination, the content that is generated by AI is fabricated. And there is no confidence there. And AI will never tell you that, oh, this is fabricated. That's the problem. We use it in medical diagnosis, and this can lead to incorrect medical guidance, can lead to fabricated legal citations and cases, fictional companies, company names and metrics, a whole lot of things that will get messed up. How often do we have this happening? Based on the study that have been carried out, 5 to 30% of what we drop into GPT and the like vary by task and domain complexity. So what you get is a bit different from what the result should be. So in other words, none of those two can give you 100% correctness in their output. So there is need for human in the loop. There is the need for human being to look at that result and validate it at this level because they are not yet matured. Now let's look at this. I'm still talking about hallucination. Let's look at hallucination from another perspective using this workflow. I have my prompt input. The input is ambiguous request. Instead of the model telling me, oh, I do not understand what you are saying, or I don't know it, the model processes it and gives a result. The result give rise to risk of level 4. There is a first risk, which is risk of level 2, ambiguous request. The second risk of level 4, inference gap. Why is it big gap? The model is giving you something that is different from what it should based on the fact that the input was not properly aligned. The third step, the model has taken it in. The initial output is a confidence error. And when this comes, the risk hits from 4 to 7. So you can see the multiplier effect is going from 2 to 4, from 4 to 7, and from 7 to 9. To 9, when the decision happens. Now, at the verification layer, it is expected that if checked, the risk can go from level 9 to level 3. That is if there is a human in the loop. But there is no check. It can go from level 9 to level 4, level 12. So what that means is that the risk of taking a wrong decision based on model output, based on LLM output, is higher than otherwise. Let's evaluate the regulatory impact and the likelihood. The first one, high impact, high likelihood. In this case, in the healthcare and finance industry, where there is a lot of regulations, there are mandates due to high risk of harm and regulatory scrutiny. So in this area, bringing in a model requires a very high level of regulation, a very high level of risk oversight. The second part, high impact, low likelihood. This refers to emerging sectors. And when we talk of emerging sectors, we are talking about sectors different from health, different from finance. In these cases, these sectors, they have significant potential harm, but less immediate regulatory focus, because either there's regulation around them or not, the risk is not as high impact, high likelihood. High impact, high likelihood where we have finance and healthcare can lead to the death of somebody, can lead to financial loss. Now let's look at low impact, high likelihood. In this case, we are talking about areas where regulatory visibility is high, and compliance can be achieved. But the risk in that industry is very low. Then we have the low impact, low likelihood. In this area, there is low likelihood that yet this risk will surface. It will crystallize. Even when it crystallizes, the impact is minimal. So limited regulatory attention is required in this area because mandates are less urgent. Now, risk number 2, embedded and emergent bias. From the second day, in fact, as soon as a model is deployed and additional data is being added to it, the model starts to drift with immediate effect. This is one salient problem that is very, very rare for anybody to notice. In other words, the risk embedded in it, it's in every organization where AI is being applied today, because we don't actually look at this area, but it's key. So, looking at risk 2, embedded and emergent bias. Bias can be looked at from different angles. The training given to AI was done with a data set. That data set was not produced by AI, it was produced by a human being. So because it was produced by a human being, that data set is assumed to be subjective. If subjective, then it is likely going to be biased. So the moment the data is biased, definitely you are likely going to have a biased output, garbage in, garbage out. That's one issue. The second bias possibility is model choices, using the wrong model for a particular situation. And the third one is deployment context. What is the governance around the deployment? If the governance is discriminatory, definitely the result of this whole process will be discriminatory. Research finds that 60% of hiring and lending tools show measurable bias against minority groups. In other words, when hiring is being done using AI, it shows that those areas where we have major groups, the major groups are always being preferred against the minority groups. Static and dynamic bias. This kind of bias happen over time. They happen over time, but they start from the next day a model is deployed. As soon as it is deployed, monitoring is expected to kick off, but we don't do that. Consultants always go check, maybe periodically, monthly or quarterly, and that kind of thing, and that is dangerous. So, the context of measuring bias, of taking care of bias, of detecting bias determines how far the world can go. Case study. This is an HR situation. Now let's look at the context. An AI-driven HR tool was deployed to rank applicants. Despite equivalent qualifications, candidates were scored lower than resumes used gender-coded language. indicating the model learned progress that correlated with gender rather than job relevant merits. What were the findings? Model outputs were sensitive to wording cues. That's the meaning. Creating semantic score differences without guardrails. The ranking favors certain language style unrelated to performance. Masking bias within seemingly objective scores. This is what happens in ATS. ATS tool that is being used globally. There is this ATS algorithm that is being used to filter resumes, CVs and resumes. So deploying those things is not bad in entirety. However, monitoring the performance of these tools is really challenging. Now, what are the implications? Reliance on unmitigated AI output elevates legal exposure. We've just talked about this earlier, and it puts organizations at risk. For GDPR, $20 million. Violating it, no problem. $20 million if it happens in the EU. So I'm not sure many organizations want to pay this kind of money as penalty. In other words, deploying AI models requires a lot of scrutiny, a lot of processes that will guarantee proper governance. Risk number 3, data leakage and privacy breaches. Data can be exposed. It is very possible because when training the model, it is possible that the models are being trained with sensitive data and it takes it in. At the end of the day, there is no control around output monitoring and prompt engineering, then it becomes an issue. It becomes an issue. That's one risk on its own in terms of model output leakage. And that explains why when a model is being trained, synthetic data is better used or anonymized data, because they are data that you cannot trace their elements to a particular person or place or entity. Integration point exposure. Because data moves from one system to another, this sometimes happens using application programming interface, APIs, and system integration, other system integration tools. When this happens, if security was not properly implemented, there is likely to be an exposure. Number 3. So we've talked about exposure at the end at the model side, exposure integration point. Now, exposure at training point, is close to output. Training point is when data is being trained, you're being trained with control data instead of anonymized data. The output also can generate control data, which shouldn't be. Now, the third thing is improper data sanitization. That means no validity check, validation check, no consistency check, no sanitization, no cleaning. The data was just used as it is to train the model, and the model generates rubbish. Now, this screen is a typical example of data leakage scenario. This shows sensitive data surfacing in their output. But this is just an assumption, so it's been taken care of. So it's not showing anything too serious. Rather, it's just to let us know Now, you can generate something of this nature. Now, when the challenge is, why does this matter? This shows visual proof and it clarifies risk, which accelerate stakeholder alignment. When models or data leakage is being given a proper attention, there is no way the model will not perform well in this regard. And the call to action is very simple. There is need for access audit to data at every point, because as data moves is being transformed, there's need for audit, there's need for redaction, there's need for differential privacy. Explaining control gaps and liabilities. Control gaps can happen at anywhere and in all places. For as long as there are processes, there will always be control gaps. For as long as people move here and there or data is being transformed, there will always be control gaps. So there is need for somebody, the control team, looking at this direction. The potential liabilities also needs to be checked. This includes legal penalties resulting from breaches and rest, brand reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. So if any of this happen, they can be catastrophic. So there is need for a check on these tools. Mitigation strategies also should be in place to take care of uneventualities in case any of these risk crystallizes. Mapping is expected also. Now, the key realization here is that the cost of uncontrolled AI is not funny. It's not funny, it's very expensive, very, very expensive. Globally, annual global cost of AI-related compliance failures is about $10 billion, which is greater than the economies of a lot of countries in the world, more than 100 countries in the world. This is the reason why we are on this call, to reinforce continuous audit and controls. Do we need it? Yes, it has to be iterative. Iterative AI audit needs to be done, and it has to be done periodically. It could be monthly, daily, weekly, or just a particular period. And it has to be regular. Then adaptive control. This happens as technology evolves. Then governance framework also is expected to be fine-tuned to ensure that takes care of every part of the system. In conclusion, ensuring safe and compliant AI deployment is the responsibility of everyone within an organization. Although the board holds accountability, the executives hold the responsibility. I can be reached at any time at www.aicontrol.org. Thank you. Once again, my name is Oladimeji Kansin. Thank you.